It is February the 15th, 2017, and I am in the office of the Lincoln Foundation in Louisville, Kentucky. And I have today a brother and sister who are going to talk to us about Lincoln Institute. So I will allow them to introduce themselves.
I'm Ann Spencer Reynolds, class of 1959.
Richard Reynolds, class of '62.
All right, so who wants to talk to us about, how many of your family members went to Lincoln?
Just the two of us.
Just the two of you. Now, what is your home county?
Oldham County, LaGrange, Kentucky.
Okay. Now, why did you end up at Lincoln?
There wasn't no place else to go.
Explain that, because maybe 20 years from now somebody will pick this up and they say they don't understand, why did you
Okay.
end up going to Lincoln?
Okay, because the schools were segregated at that time, and we couldn't attend Oldham County High School. So we were bused not across town, we were bused out of the county, and it took 2 hours to get to Lincoln. Although I stayed on the campus, they would pick up the high school kids in LaGrange, then go to Crestwood, pick up the high school students and the grade school students on the way to the Pee Wee Valley Colored School. Then they would go to Pee Wee Valley.
Are you leaving something out now?
Okay, there you can pick
Leaving
that.
out some of the stops that we made.
Well, I will
'Cause I
Brownsboro,
rode the bus for 2 years.
Brownsboro, then
We would leave LaGrange, go to Crestwood, then to Floydsburg, back to Crestwood, then to Brownsboro, back to Crestwood, then to Frasertown, then to Pee Wee Valley, then to Lincoln.
In one day?
We would leave in the winter months, and it would be dark when we left home, and it would be dark when we got back home in the evening,
Now, what time did you get on the bus?
a little before 6,
Before 6? And what time did you get home?
a little after 6.
Now, did the bus pick you up in front of the house, your house?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long of a bus ride was that?
Approximately 2 hours plus or minus
One way?
one way.
Okay. Now, you went to high school at Lincoln. What about your elementary school or middle school? Where did you go? What school did you attend?
we attended LaGrange Training School.
Mhm.
There wasn't a middle school in those days. We,
And-
from the 1st to the 8th grade,
Okay.
then on to Lincoln.
So you went to Lincoln in ninth grade?
Right.
Richard?
Ninth-
Same?
ninth, same.
Okay. Now, what did you feel about leaving your home county to go to school at Lincoln? If you could think back to 1959 and 1962, did you
Everybody-
graduate, and were you afraid?
No, everybody did it, so everybody that I knew went to Lincoln, so it was just assumed that we would go also, and we didn't think anything of it, because that was the only experience we had. We had nothing to compare it to. We rode the bus for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, 2 hours in the afternoon.
Now, were your parents educated?
Yes, my mother was alumni of Kentucky State University, and my father from Simmons University.
Okay. Now, were your parents teachers?
My mother was
What did she teach?
elementary in LaGrange, and she came to LaGrange she also taught in Somerset, Kentucky.
Okay. And what about your father?
He was an electrician.
Okay. So were you then, would you have been considered the upper class?
Yes.
Didn't really know, because I guess everybody was the same.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, not really the same, but at first, when I started school, my mother was my teacher. And so I was sort of considered the teacher's pet and the teacher's son. And I got teased a lot because I was the lightest skinned person in the school. And I got teased because of how light skinned and being the teacher's son. But that was, that was just a part of growing up.
What were your experiences, Ann?
Oh gosh, mine were worse. I had to fight my way home every day, and the girls would beat me up and pull my hair out, and I was too proud to stay and walk back home with Mama, so I just took the punches and fought my way home every day.
But what did your parents say about you having to go through that? The fighting. I noticed that they would know that you had been in the fight when you got
Right,
home.
but I guess they understood why. And then one day, one of my classmates even came out on a porch to my front door, and my grandmother came to the door, and that was the end of that. So, and really, some of the same people kind of still feel the same way, but whatever. That's water in the dam.
Okay. Now, Ann, you said you lived at Lincoln for 4 years on campus?
Yes, I stayed on campus for 4 years.
And Richard, you said 2?
2 years.
Okay. Well, why? Why was it 4 for you and 2 for you?
I wanted to play sports.
Okay.
And in order to play sports, it's best to live on campus
Okay.
because they would practice after school hours, and I wouldn't have a way back home. So I had to stay on campus in the last 2 years.
Okay. Did you play the first 2 years?
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, which sports did you play?
Basketball, I played JV basketball, and I played baseball.
Okay. But not varsity basketball?
I quit before the season was over, so I didn't get credit for being a
Okay.
member of the varsity. I was a senior at the time,
Mhm.
and I was doing a lot of bench duty.
Okay.
And I got tired of that, so I quit basketball and I played baseball.
Okay. Now, and 4 years. Why did you live on campus for 4 years?
I just did. I mean, I just did. It was just expected, I guess.
Okay. Now, what about the cost? Do you know who paid for you to go to Lincoln?
The Board of Education paid my tuition, and
Of Oldham County?
right, and my parents paid my room and board.
Okay.
Mhm.
So with you then, I guess, Richard, for 2 years, your parents didn't have to worry about paying room or board?
I don't, the first 2 years?
Now, the first 2
First years, I don't know about the other two. I guess they paid. I don't remember.
So was that an issue that you were concerned with, how it was being paid for?
No.
No, I never knew they were paying. I didn't know.
Okay. How did you feel as you were making that trip? Well, I guess it applies just to you, Richard, for the 2 years that you were going by these other schools where the white kids were going.
All right.
How did you feel? Did that bother you?
No, not really. Not really, because there was like a social hour, I guess. I had grade school kids on the bus, plus high school kids. We had grade school kids that would go to Pee Wee Valley.
Mm-hmm.
We would drop them off there. And then we would we would do homework on the bus in the morning. We had 2 hours. But our homework would be kind of shaky sometimes. trying to write a report on the bus, but that's what we did.
Now, that's an interesting question. Did the teachers take in consideration that many students had to ride the bus? And I'm talking about take that in consideration when it came to giving homework. That if you were having you have to ride the bus 2 hours to go home, it would make it very difficult to do homework, wouldn't it?
They didn't take that in consideration, I don't
they
think,
did.
because there was also a bus from eastern Jefferson County for the kids in Griffithtown, which is a part of Middletown, and Berrytown, which is a part of Anchorage. Plus they had, how many buses came from Shelby County? About three?
About 3 from Shelby.
Three buses from Shelby County, and they went all over Shelby County picking up the children.
Mhm.
So, but some kids, I still call us kids.
Mhm.
Thank you. At 75, I'm still a kid. But they thought that the teachers cared more about the kids that stayed on campus than they did the day students, but they didn't. You know, they loved us all the same. Mm.
We never made homeroom though.
That was home the first period?
Yeah,
Okay.
we very seldom got there in time for homeroom.
Now, Ann, did it ever concern you that you were going past these schools where the white kids were going?
No, I didn't give it a thought because I tell them now, the white kids that are my age, I said, I'm so glad I couldn't go to school with you. I wouldn't have got the good education that I got at Lincoln Institute.
Okay, we will talk about that in a few minutes, because I'm picking that up in other places, and even the books I'm reading about the schools at that time period. And many African Americans are saying that there was something that they gained from those schools, that they were all black, even though they knew that the books were used and some other things. They're very positive about the education. So you did not want to go.
It didn't even cross my mind.
Okay. Well, what about, was your family affected by segregation?
Not really.
Well,
I mean,
The rules in terms of our unwritten rules about getting off the sidewalk and,
well,
no, we
Right.
wasn't that deep, and that's further down south.
mhm.
But as we grew up, our best friends when we were younger was the white girl and boy right across the street, and their father was the veterinarian.
Mhm.
And I remember, so we played together and everything for years and years and years, looking at how they duty and riding ponies in their backyard and everything. And I remember Richard, at a certain point, I remember my grandmother telling me that we couldn't continue to go places with them. And then I tell them about when you went to the library and Miss Ball, the librarian, lived right next door
oh yeah.
to the Stearnses.
Well, our mother started to take me to the city library. Oh, I was so excited. I was reading and I was checking books out, and I was just enjoying it. One day, the librarian told our mother that I couldn't come there anymore. And she said that the reason why was the man named Durson, who paid for the library, had a stipulation that it was only for whites, with no blacks. And if I was allowed to stay there, I would lose funding or something like that. I wasn't able to return to the library anymore.
And that's an event that you still remember?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Now, you said something, Ann, about you lived across the street from whites?
Yes,
Your neighborhood was not segregated?
yes, but it was just like,
Yeah, that was a borderline. That was a line.
Okay.
They-
So-
yeah, but it was just
well,
like
sorta, no, because there were
one, two,
whites on
three,
each
four.
side, but there were also black and the whole block. There were blacks behind us, whites in front of us.
It
So
was
it
just
was-
like 4,
And everybody knew
5
everybody.
black families on that block.
Mhm.
And we were just surrounded, all the rest of people were white homes. But
Mhm.
then when you went down the Hindhouse Street, you know, it got blacker and black, black, black. And then they had a other side of town, they called it, and blacks were on that other side of town, but they weren't had any whites mixed in on the other side of town.
And we had a railroad track.
Was that the dividing line?
No, well, not really, because there were blacks on both sides of the railroad track. But we did have a railroad track. That
But what's unique about the railroad track
It ran
is
through
it
the
runs
middle
right
town.
straight down through Main Street
And LaGrange.
in LaGrange, and people would come to see me, and they like, a train running right down the middle of Main Street, and people are still astonished if they go there now, like in the restaurants they have, and they don't think the train track is being used, and then all of a sudden they eating in a
Yep.
restaurant, and this train comes.
Oh, it's this Detroit. It's still.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you grow up in segregation? In some communities, it was a separate world. Did you have black business people and black funeral homes or hospital or doctors?
No,
No.
LaGrange was too small for that.
Okay.
We had a black bootlegger. That's the only business person I can think of.
And there were churches, right?
Churches and the school.
And what about when you got sick? What about a doctor?
We had to go to Pee Wee. We had to go to Pee Wee Valley.
Okay.
we had a doctor now. But
Oh,
he
we
was
had a
white
doctor. We had a white doctor,
White doctor.
but we couldn't go to the White Hospital.
White hospital there.
Yeah. So when I was born, weighed 4 pounds and 4 ounces.
Were you premature?
Yes. And my grandmother was, like they called them, practical nurses in those days. So she was afraid. The ambulance that time was the funeral home's hearse. The funeral home, you know, they use it for both. Not the hearse, but the ambulance and when they went to pick up the dead people. So she was afraid that I would die on the way to Louisville to be placed in an incubator. So she put me in a cardboard box with hot water bottles and fed me with a medicine dropper. So when my brother comes along, my mother said, I don't think I want to go through that again. So at her hospital in Harrodsburg, she could go to the hospital. Okay? So that's where my brother was born.
Oh, in Harrodsburg. Now, were you also premature?
No.
Okay. So you couldn't wait to get in the world, right? Ann?
Yeah, I was the first, though. I was the first black person born in the hospital in Harrisburg.
Oh, you were? Okay, well, you put that. Now, does Ahmed and Elsa know that?
I think so.
Well, be sure to tell them
I
that.
think they know.
That you're a historical
I've
figure.
showed them the room, I think. You know, I said, I was born in that corner room right up there.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the Lincoln experience. Now, are there teachers that even now, many years later, I guess for both of you, at least 55 years later, at the minimum,
At
that
least.
you remember that had a positive experience? Or are there teachers that made your life interesting?
I remember all of my teachers, and they had a real positive effect. Like Miss Jenny Williams had passed recently. She taught me English and French. Mrs. Ransall, an English and French teacher. Eleanor Young was a big influence. Also, she was the librarian at that time. Mrs. Bennett, who was the music teacher. Mr. and Mrs. Carroll. Mr. Carroll taught me biology. And I remember one day in biology class, he mentioned my grandfather, which really surprised me. And I'm like, how do you know my grandfather? Okay, so Mr. Carroll was from Warsaw, Kentucky, and my grandfather used to preach in Sparta. So that's how he knew my grandfather. And Mrs. Carroll and the Margaret Board, the dormitory director, and Mr. Reed, the office manager, and he taught me how to print and develop film. Mrs. Nesbitt, the home economics teacher. Mr. Garner, the history teacher. Mr. Mucker, civics teacher.
You do remember all.
So they were, and then Mrs. Board knew my mother. Mrs. Ransom knew my mother. So that was an influence also.
So you came what, 4 years later?
I remember all my teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember all of them, and I remember how kind they were toward me. During that time, I had a real bad stutter, very bad. But you know, they wouldn't let anyone tease me, and you know, on the whole time I was at Lincoln, you know, no one ever teased me or made fun of me or anything. And the teachers wouldn't allow it. You know.
Now, so you liked all your teachers? Now you mentioned something about your mother, that they knew your mother. Do you think that made a difference?
Well, no, not really. You know, it's just that they knew each other, so I was happy that they knew each other.
I didn't know that they knew my parents. She knew, but I.
You didn't know it.
I didn't know it.
All right. So what about the rules? How did you? I've heard that there was a lot of discipline at Lincoln.
Yes, it was. You couldn't walk past the fire plug with a boy.
Mm-hmm.
He could walk you from the gym to the fire plug.
Fire plug.
The fire plug was there where you went across the street to go to the girls' dormitory.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so he could walk you from the gym to the fire plug, which is like over there somewhere, and maybe half a block, if that. And you could stand and talk at the fire plug for a little while. Then you had to say bye-bye, or you might got a little kiss, and you went on. Went on in the dormitory.
Okay.
Well, we had some classes in the girls' dormitory. Now, I had my English class. I was always in the girls'
Now,
dormitory.
which dormitory was that? What's the name of it?
Belknap Hall.
Is that the one? What's the one that's not being used now?
Belknap Hall.
That's Belknap, near the gym.
Yes, and they should restore it. Doesn't make sense. They've been using it for storage for years. They could have renovated it instead of building a new building.
All right. So, did you have problems looking back? As a 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old, did you have problems with the rules?
No.
No.
So neither one of you tried?
I didn't think they were that strict. I didn't have a problem with them.
It was kind of just like the rules at home.
Yeah.
You know, some things you just weren't supposed to do, and you knew that. So,
No problem with
about the same as our parents was the same at Lincoln.
Did either one of you work on campus?
No.
Did you want to?
No, it didn't cross my mind.
Okay, because I've talked to some
Yeah,
individuals who
some
did
kids did work like in the cafeteria.
Now,
and-
talk about cafeteria. Every college student I know complains about cafeteria food. Would you complain about Lincoln's?
It wasn't all that bad, I don't think. Some days might not be so good, but the majority of the time. And I know today some of the kids talk about the snack sandwich we got on Sundays. When you went,
Well, describe that to. I think I got a few of
You've
those
heard
when I
about
came to.
that.
No,
I
I
know.
got those when I came to Berea.
okay.
Oh.
So you got your Sunday meal, like midday, and you wouldn't get supper, but they would give you a brown paper bag with a sandwich with bologna and cheese and an apple.
That was it.
And the sandwich would be in a, mm, what's the clear kind of paper?
Wax paper.
Wax paper,
Mm.
okay. So you took that back to the dormitory, and you took the apple out, and you plugged up your iron, and you laid it down flat with the sandwich inside that brown paper bag, and you ironed it on both sides. And the next thing you know, you had a grilled cheese sandwich.
Did you do that also?
Yeah, yeah. When I went to college, I introduced that to a lot of folks at school. They said, "Oh, where did you learn to do this?" Because the college was the same way. Like on Saturday, they gave us a brown bag, and I would take it back to the room, and I would iron. And everybody was just amazed. What are you doing? Ironing your sandwich.
All right, so what about your extracurricular activities at Lincoln? Were you involved in anything, Ann?
I was involved in so much until in my yearbook. Okay, here's my picture, and the list was that long. Wasn't no room for anything else.
Mhm.
And my classmate Henry McAtee wrote football 1, 2, 3, 4. So I was in all things like. One thing, I was in New Homemakers of America, and one year I ran for first vice president of the National Association of New Homemakers of America, and my home economics teacher and I rode the train to North Carolina A&T for the national conference, and I remember thinking that it would be real bumpy sleeping on the train in the berth, but it wasn't. It was real comfortable. I was in the choir. I was in the camera club, the YWCA. That's all I can think of right now, but there's a whole bunch more.
Okay. Richard?
No, I didn't do a lot because I was on the bus 2 years. So the last year I was only in the camera club and the yearbook staff. And
You played baseball.
baseball and basketball.
What position did you play on the baseball team?
Second base.
Okay. Did you get to play a lot?
Not a lot because I was behind Tommy Turner.
He must have been good.
Yes. Yes, I only got in when the game was already wrapped up.
So you loved just the participation,
Oh,
the
yeah, I
competition?
love baseball. Yeah, that was my favorite sport always.
Okay. And what is your opinion of the Young family? Mr. Young, Dr. Young, his
they were
wife, the
just,
children?
there was a family that you just looked up to. They were like giants, and you respected them, and you didn't want to be sent to Dr. Young's office, but anything.
Did either one of you get sent there?
No.
No, okay. Now, why would you want to go to his office?
Oh, if you got in trouble doing something, you'd have to go to his office, and
Cut class or something like that.
yeah, he'd have a little talk
Yeah.
with you.
Do you know anyone that was sent home?
There were a few, but I can't remember who.
Do you know why?
I'm guessing now because I don't remember. Maybe slipping off campus might have been one. Doing something with the young lady might have been one.
Now, have you ever thought about, what would have happened if you were sent home?
Oh gosh, my daddy.
Explain.
If I was sent home, I would get the biggest spanking from my daddy.
I don't know. Like I say,
Is it something you just
we
wouldn't
didn't really
imagine?
get in trouble, but there were things that happened that we could have gotten in trouble, but we didn't get caught. You know, like
Oh,
that,
okay, so,
you know, so
oh,
that-
you didn't get caught. So that means you did it, but you didn't get caught. You say you didn't do it.
I didn't do it.
Okay. So did you enjoy which years did you enjoy best? The 2 years that you rode the bus or the 2 years you were on campus?
On campus.
Why?
I didn't have to ride the bus every day back home. Plus, I could go to the movies. I could have a girlfriend on campus, and we would go to the movies and
And where
go
was
to
the movie?
dances.
The movies
In the
shown?
gym.
In the gym, okay.
And you
Well, it wasn't-
couldn't, maybe you could sit maybe like that next to each other, but don't get like that, because Mr. Carroll would say, boy,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. So you knew to separate. Couldn't dance too close either. He'd say the same thing to you
So was Mr. Carroll was mainly responsible for?
for separating us.
Well,
But the way you didn't do anything to. It
I
sounds
might have
it sounds
tried.
Okay, it sounds like Richard may have tried.
when I stayed on campus, the gym had burned,
Okay.
and I had movies in what was called the barracks, I guess we call the buildings. They used to be like army barracks.
Oh, behind the gym,
Yeah,
barracks,
yeah.
okay, behind Brill Hall.
That's where we had our
I
social
forgot
life.
about those.
A lot smaller than the gym.
And now you talk about movies. What have you thought about? What type of movies were shown?
I don't
Whatever the
remember.
white people were looking at, the cow, I don't know, I don't remember.
Mhm.
Whatever movies were popular during that time, we didn't have our own movies, so.
I remember movies about the Jackie Robinson stories. I remember movies with Paul Robeson in them.
Okay.
Okay. They were shown on campus.
Yeah.
Now, so okay. So did you either one of you go in town? I guess into Simpsonville.
No.
Well, Shelbyville.
You went to Shelbyville.
During my junior, I guess my senior year, when all the guys, they were just filling our oats, and we wanted to get a little taste, so we would vote to see who would hitchhike to Shelbyville and get a half pint. So I never had to go, but I always contributed.
But so did you get the taste?
Yes, I got.
Oh, you got the taste. So in other words, you were a little bit more mischievous than your older sister.
They would we would hitchhike. Now, I didn't have to hitchhike, but they would hitchhike to Shelbyville and find someone in town to buy the liquor for them,
And they were willing to
Hitchhike.
sell it to you even though they knew you were a high school student?
and hitchhike back to Lincoln. Yeah.
Now, did you hitchhike in the town?
Lord, no.
I used to hitchhike to LaGrange sometimes on weekends.
Mm-hmm. Now, everyone that I've talked to has mentioned hitchhiking,
Yeah.
and no one has mentioned any problems. That
No.
even whites would stop to pick you
Right.
up.
No, never had a problem hitchhiking.
Is that because of the image that a student had who went to Lincoln Institute? The image.
Don't know.
Would you
but
think that would happen now?
I would have to hitchhike to Middletown and then hitchhike back to LaGrange.
Middletown, the one closer to Louisville.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We hitchhike up 60
Mm-hmm.
to Middletown to LaGrange Road.
Mm-hmm.
Then we would hitchhike to LaGrange.
Were you ever afraid?
No. Everybody hitchhiked.
Everybody,
Yeah.
but you didn't.
All my friends
No,
hitchhiked.
never even thought about hitchhiking.
Well, the guys, I don't think the girls.
Girls wouldn't
hitchhiked.
do it, 'cause you would have-
The girls wouldn't.
They would
hitchhike,
see,
but
you
the
had to
boys-
leave the campus and walk to the Blue Gate all the way down to 60.
Mm-hmm.
No, wasn't even heard of. Yeah. Girls slipped off campus sometimes, but
Okay.
they didn't hitchhike.
Okay. Would they slip off campus with a student, or would they try to get to Simpsonville or to Shelbyville or to Louisville?
They would probably,
Or just, was it just
Be
a different?
with another student that had access to an automobile, something like that.
Now, could students have cars?
No.
Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Did
yeah.
they?
When I was my last year, there were two fellows that had automobiles.
Mhm.
One was from Harris Creek and the other one was from Goshen. And that's the only way they had to get back home on weekends.
Mhm.
Rather they couldn't drive their car during the time they were on campus. They were only home and back.
Mhm. Now, so they weren't supposed to take you into Simpsonville?
Oh, no. The only time that they let us use our cars was for the prom, if we had a prom. We were allowed to drive our cars on campus and to prom and back.
Mhm. You can
My
say
prom was
something?
in Louisville.
I hadn't thought about this. I had a prom breakfast
Okay.
at my house my junior year and my senior year. And thinking back, some students did have a car because that was the only way they could get from the campus after the prom to LaGrange,
Now, you mentioned the prom. Who could go to the prom? Juniors and seniors?
juniors and seniors.
Okay, so let's just, you have a junior who was dating a sophomore. Could the
Sophomore couldn't go.
sophomores couldn't go?
No.
Could you have dates from off campus?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Yes, because I remember a young lady, well, she was a day student, and her date for the prom had already graduated from Lincoln. I think that's when she was there. And her mother, she lived near Crestwood, Kentucky, and her mother kept calling, you know, while she was there. I don't remember if that was my prom breakfast or college party. I don't remember. But
Mhm. So both of you went to the prom, junior, senior years?
yes.
Want to talk about your experiences?
Mm.
Do you
I
remember
just,
those?
I just remember my mother taking me to 4th Street where I couldn't try on anything, but I did get,
No, explain why you couldn't try on anything.
because I'm black and black people couldn't try on clothes. They might get them dirty. But anyway, I remember, I had it not too long. I remember my prom dress was orange. And orange is the new black now. But I had a orange dress and orange shoes. And my senior year, I had a white dress and white shoes.
And you had a date?
Sure.
Well, I didn't.
Excuse me?
Oh, that was not a problem?
There was no problem.
Okay, so you that means you could turn down some also?
Sure could.
Okay. Now, Richard, did you have dates?
At my junior prom, I did.
Mm-hmm.
That prom was on the Bella Louisville.
Okay.
But the senior prom, I didn't have a date because my girlfriend at the time was a sophomore,
Okay.
and she couldn't come. But I had a good time at the prom, and my girlfriend had caught a ride on campus and was going to come in the prom and get me.
I remember.
Someone told her that I was in there with another girl.
Was it true?
Well, not really. We were dancing and sitting together, but it was nothing, just dancing and socializing.
Okay.
But the word got out that I was in there with somebody else.
So you did have to do some explaining.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, another big event I remember from Charles M. Hall and Alcoa was May Day. Now, was May Day important at Lincoln?
Yes, I have some pictures with me of May Day. My first May Day was when I was in the 8th grade. And my parents said I could go to Lincoln for May Day, like it was like on Friday or Thursday or something like that. So when my teacher found out I was going to Lincoln for May Day, first she told me that I couldn't go, okay? And then she told me if I went, that I couldn't be the valedictorian. And I'm like, okay, see you, girlfriend. So I have pictures with me of my first May Day. So I rode the bus, okay, to Lincoln and rode the bus back home. And after I started Lincoln, May Days we wrapped a maypole and we had a queen and king and candidates that ran, for the queen and the king, and wrapped a maypole, and it was just a big happy day.
Richard, you remember?
My experience was when I was in the 8th grade, and that's when our school would go then to May Day. And I had a basketball tournament for the grade school kids. So we had a team. We had 5 members. And they had an art contest. We had to draw a picture of Dr. Young. And that's, I think, when I decided to take up athletics instead of art, because I either had to be in the art contest or play basketball. I couldn't do both. And if I didn't play basketball, we didn't have a team. So I didn't get in the art contest, and I played basketball. And we lost.
Now, since both of you went to Lincoln first, and you came along afterwards,
3 years.
did people remember your sister at Lincoln?
Well, when I first started at Lincoln, some people would call me a little Ann. That year, I didn't see her much, I was a day student. She was on campus, and I rarely saw her during the whole year.
So she didn't help pave the way for you?
No.
Did you offer any
She didn't have
advice?
time. She
Didn't
didn't have
have
time.
time.
I
She
was
didn't have time
busy.
for
I was a
me.
senior, and he was a
She
freshman.
didn't have time for me. So I didn't see her the whole year.
You saw me on weekends
Yeah,
when I come home. Now,
sometime.
the bus was convenient for me if I wanted to go home like overnight, but I had to get permission from my mother, and then if my daddy didn't come pick me up on campus, I could go home on the bus and come back on the bus Monday morning.
Now, did it sounds like your family had a vehicle, had a car?
Yes,
Okay.
since 1930s.
1930.
So prior to.
Okay, so when did both of you learn how to drive?
Well, that's something else about Lincoln. We had driver education. We had a 1957, I think, Ford hardtop convertible.
And you're the first person that's told me that.
Yeah, I didn't know.
I've got pictures of it also.
Okay. And did
And
you,
Mr. Reed was the instructor, the business office
Mhm.
manager that taught me photography.
Okay. Now, when both of you came to Lincoln, it was after the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision. And schools were beginning to desegregate. Did either one of you at that time think about what that would mean to you and what it would mean to Lincoln, or was just something?
It was
Anybody
just
talk-
something that happened that I didn't even think about or care anything about.
Never thought about it.
So, in other words, the students on campus were not concerned or worried about it?
Nor the day students.
No, did you start seeing any of your friends not return to Lincoln, but started to go into school in their home counties?
Mm.
After a while, this is probably after I left, I think some of those counties that were a great distance from Lincoln or even close by because they had to pay the tuition
Mhm.
for those kids to stay on campus. So it saved them money for the kids to go to the white high school in their hometown.
My
But-
senior year, Oldham County Schools integrated. So the incoming freshmen, in order to go to Oldham County High School, that was the end of the bus. That's when
Now-
the bus stopped.
Did you, since it was your senior year, did they give you a choice? Could you go to
No,
Lincoln?
no. After my senior year.
Okay,
The next year, the
okay,
schools integrated.
okay.
Yeah,
So you could still graduate from Lincoln?
yeah.
Okay. And you were there the year that, when you got to Lincoln, when did, I know the gym burned. Who was there when the gym burned down?
Richard.
Okay.
I was. That's when we had to run the basketball practice every night.
Now, where was practice?
At Simpsonville.
Okay, now how far
Well,
approximately?
That was about a little over a mile and a half from the campus.
Yeah, that was the predominantly white school?
White school in Simpsonville.
Now, when you were there, had Lincoln started to playing the white schools?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the year before I started playing, I think that's when they started playing the white schools. Because when I started, we started playing Shelbyville, Shelby County, and another white school. We played DeSales and Gallatin County, those schools.
Now, how were you treated, remember, how were you treated at those schools? Especially when you went to, did they come to Lincoln to play, or did you always have to go to their,
We went to their school.
went to their school?
Yeah.
That's right, because there was no gym. But
Yeah.
there was a baseball field at Lincoln.
There was a baseball field.
Now, did they come to Lincoln to play
Yeah.
baseball?
Yeah.
Now, was there?
No, I take that back. We played Trinity and DeSales, and we had to go there. Wait a minute, yes they did. Some schools did come to campus. They
Okay.
did, yeah. Some of them did.
Now, Ann, do you remember when you were there, had Lincoln started playing the white schools?
No.
Okay.
When I was there, Central High School and Lincoln were always great rivals.
Yeah.
And it might have been my freshman year. I just remember, okay, being on the sidelines and taking pictures. That might have been on the campus for a game. But anyway, we fought so bad until
Yeah.
when I was there, I don't remember exactly what year it was, could have been my freshman year, that we couldn't play against each other anymore.
They stopped. Yeah.
Mhm.
Stopped
So I
playing
just
Central.
remember us running, getting on the bus and getting tail out of Louisville, getting back to Lincoln.
And now you would be living in Louisville, right?
Yeah. The last football game that Louisville and Central played, our father took me to the game. It was in the Yale High School, I think, stadium. And a fight broke out. And guys were coming with clubs and baseball bats and everything. And Daddy got me out. I was scared. You know, I was then, I must have been in the 7th grade maybe that time. And man, we got out of there. And that was the last time they played each other.
So, have you ever talked to, especially since you live in Louisville, and both of you live in Louisville,
Mhm.
you ever talked to anybody from who attended Louisville Central at that time and talk about those good old days?
Just like the young man that works here, Jimmy, his mother and I see each other every now and then. She went to Central. And I haven't run into too many people, okay, that went to Central at the same time I was at Lincoln.
But
And then if I do, we don't talk about those days. The subject doesn't come up, but it's a lot of Lincoln nights and Central nights that are here in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of them. The only people I knew, I didn't know about the rivalry, so there was before their time also, so
Mhm.
I didn't even know about it.
So, the Blue Gate. You were blue
The
when you
Blue Gate.
came through it first time, you were blue when you left.
No.
Okay. You want to talk to me about the Blue Gate? How did you feel when you first arrived on campus, and how did you feel the day that you left with that degree in your hand?
I felt great both times.
Okay.
Because I had already been on campus, you know, to visit like the May Day previous that met, and then I went.
Mhm.
And something else, Lincoln used to have like in October, they'd have and the surrounding grade schools would come and bring their artwork and needlework and canning, and like from all the little towns in Shelby County, like Montclair, uh, Elk Creek, the Pee Wee Valley School, LaGrange School, and it would be a competition, and they'd have all their booths and wares set up in the gym. So I had attended some of those
Mhm.
before I went to Lincoln, including that May Day. So I was just happy as a lark.
Okay. So the Blue Gate, Richard?
I was just glad to graduate.
You're glad?
I was just glad to graduate. Yeah, I felt relief, I guess, you know,
Okay.
because my last semester, I had the mumps,
Oh.
and I missed school for almost a month, and my chemistry teacher was threatening to flunk me because I had missed how many days.
Mhm.
But he gave me a few little tests to take, and he let me pass with, I think, maybe a C minus or something. I don't know, but
Okay.
he let me slide.
All right. So, after Lincoln, just a quick summary of where did you go? And after Lincoln, did you go to college?
Right up the road to Kentucky State
Okay.
College.
And you're a proud thoroughbred?
I'm
Were,
a
were
proud-
they thoroughbreds then?
Yeah, they've been bred so long.
They've been bred a long time.
Mhm.
And you graduated?
Yes.
And what did you do professionally in your life?
Social work.
How many years?
I don't know. Because it would be different agencies, you know, I'd say maybe 20. I don't know. I'm just guessing off the top of my head.
Okay. In Louisville, mainly Louisville?
Oldham and Louisville.
Oldham. So you basically have stayed around the area?
Right.
Okay. Richard?
I went to Tennessee State.
Tiger, right?
Tennessee State Tiger.
Good.
Right, that's right. And see, I graduated, and I was working in the aircraft industry in Nashville before I graduated. And I left Nashville, and during that time it was kind of hot there for us, so we decided, well, we better get out of town. We got my degree, let's go. So I went to California for a while in the aircraft industry, and then the aircraft industry started to closing down because it was at the end of the war in Vietnam. So I came back to Kentucky, and there was no aircraft industries around, so I ended up in the paint industry. I ended up being a lab technician and a color specialist for the paint company for a number of years. And I worked other jobs, before and after and in between. And I've been in Louisville ever since.
All right. So, what do you feel when you go back on campus now, when you go back for a reunion?
Feels good.
It feels good?
I start singing school song soon as we turn into Blue Gate. I'm like, here's to our dear old Lincoln. It's a great feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, that's her thing. I get together with my classmates,
Mhm.
and the group is getting smaller every year.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's always good to see them, and we get together. We used to have a a golf tournament, but they stopped having that because it kept getting smaller and smaller. But it's always good to see my classmates.
Now, when it comes to your experiences at Lincoln, how would you evaluate your education, I guess, in the classroom, out of the classroom? Was it negative? Was it a positive experience? Do you wish your children could have had the experience, your grandchildren? Or what do you say to those people who say, well, don't you need to be in a more diverse world? You get to give me your philosophy.
I wish every black child in the world could have gone to Lincoln Institute of Kentucky. I wish it had stayed open so my children could have gone, like you said, grandchildren. And I remember sometimes if you told somebody that went to Central or you were in Louisville that you went to Lincoln Institute, they like, oh, you smart. You know, they thought Lincoln was just for the gifted children. But one thing, a stickler with me is I hate seeing Lincoln Institute in Simpsonville, Kentucky, Lincoln Institute in Shelbyville, Kentucky. Lincoln Institute in Shelby County is okay, but people don't realize we had our own town. It was Lincoln Institute of Kentucky, Lincoln Ridge, Kentucky. We had our own post office. And Mrs. Young, the president's wife, was a postmistress.
And what was history? She was the first African American female to be a postmistress, right?
Right.
So you wish your children and grandchildren could have had the experience of a Lincoln.
Right.
Yeah. Well, when I started college, it was no big deal because I'd already been in college at Lincoln Institute. Mm-hmm. We lived on a campus just like a college town. And when I got to college, you know, it was no big deal. I already used to being away from home, you know, but it was just nothing new, I guess, you know. And as far as my son, he went to Tennessee State for 1 year. My other son, Ahmed, wanted to go. He got a scholarship to Berea, but he still wanted to go to a black school. I said, well, Ahmed, but you're getting a free ride here, you know. If you go to all black schools, it's going to cost us a whole bunch of money, so we appreciate you take the scholarship and go to Berea. Mm-hmm. But he didn't want to go to Berea.
But he ended up there, found a wife.
He wanted, yeah.
And still lives there.
That's a good place. It's a good place for him. That's a good place for him. Mm-hmm. Small town like I was brought up in, you know, it's a good town.
Okay. Go ahead, Andy.
It made me think, our maternal grandfather, Thomas Maurice Coleman, attended Berea before the day law. And I wanted Ahmed to do some research and find out something, but we haven't found out anything yet. And you recommended a lady I need to talk to, and I already know Alice Teen Turley, who's there, and several other people that work at Berea. But like children, my daughter was one of the original Porter Scholars at University of Louisville. And just like Richard said, I wanted her to go to an HBCU, but I couldn't get that scholarship she had as an original Porter Scholar at UL.
So she was one of the originals?
Yes.
So congratulations. You know, when both of my daughters received the Porter Scholarship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It has helped a lot of African Americans.
This was 1984.
Okay.
What they did, they sent this information to black churches all over the state. And so we were at First Baptist Church, LaGrange, and the pastor's wife worked at U of L, and one day she said something, when I mentioned it to her, like, I could help, da 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 da, and I'm like, it's okay, we'll do it ourselves. So, out of the whole state, they selected 51 students, and it was one of those 51 students.
Congratulations. So what final words are that either one of you would like to say about Lincoln, or something you would like to say that I forgot to ask you about?
I remember, okay, you didn't mention this, a lot of the faculty members lived on the campus. So when day students would say that the faculty cared more for the day students, wasn't true, but we were there 24 hours a day together. Where the day students, they came for their first morning class at 8 o'clock, and then, like Richard, would get home at dark, so they didn't have that close contact, because all the activities that went on at Lincoln, you saw the faculty and staff there, like the social events and the basketball games and the football games and whatever, and then the clubs, the different club meetings. So we had that close contact, constant contact with the faculty and staff.
Richard, any final words? Anything I forgot to ask that you?
No, every time I drive up I-64, I always look over to the left.
I was telling somebody that today, but I told them you will know Lincoln because you will see Berea Hall. You can do it in the winter. You can't do it in the summer. You do it in the winter. You look to the left as you're going to Berea. Go to Berea and look to the left. You'll see that one building. I said, that's Lincoln. That's Berea Hall. That's Lincoln.
They started 64 my senior year, and we would.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Now, I think some of the property for I-64, it used to be part of the Lincoln campus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Because there were like 3 ponds in the back of the campus. There's just one left, because they went right through the back of Lincoln.
Yeah. So, to close, when I've interviewed Lincolnites in the past, I've always asked them to close by doing what you started to do earlier, and that is to sing the school song, because I found it interesting how many of the Lincolnites years later still remember that song. And I have no idea what my song was from '69, especially Alcoa High School. So who's gonna lead us?
Here's to our dear old Lincoln,
so
loyal and so true.
A school above all other schools. We can depend on you. Rah, rah, rah. You are first place in all our hearts, and all our memories too. Where'er we go, the heights we reach will be because of you. Yay!
Thank you very much. It's been enjoyable.